The night was a living thing, a beast of ink and silver, swallowing the horizon whole. The sea breathed in slow, heavy sighs, its surface shimmering under a fractured moon. Somewhere in that endless dark, the siren's wrath cut through the waves like a blade through flesh, her black sails taut with wind, her hull groaning like a restless ghost. At her helm stood Captain Kale's storm-fanged vein, a man carved from salt and scars. His hair, black as drowned kelp, was tied back with a strip of leather, revealing a face weathered by storms and steel. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a battle he barely survived. His eyes, sharp and gold as pirate's coin, scanned the horizon. "Smugglers," hissed Rook, his sharp-eyed lookout, pointing to a shadow slinking through the mist. "They fly no colors, but they're heavy in the water. Could be gold, could be spice." Kale's lips curled. Gold meant freedom. Spice meant power. Either would do. "Ready the guns," he ordered, his voice rough as ship's rope. "And prepare to board." The fight was quick, brutal. The smugglers were cowards, more used to shadows than swords. Kale's crew swarmed their decks, blades flashing under the moonlight. Blood slicked the wood, dripping between the boards like dark wine. When the last smuggler fell, Kale stepped over the bodies, his boots leaving crimson prints. "Search the hold," he commanded. What they found was not gold. The stench hit him first. Rotting fish, sweat, fear. Then the sound, a low, mournful keening, like well song twisted into sorrow. Iron bars, chains, and inside, creatures of legend. Mermaids. Their tails, once vibrant as coral, now dulled by filth, were bound in cruel manacles. Their skin, pale as moonlit foam, was bruised. Some were young, barely more than girls, their gills fluttering in panic. Others were warriors, their eyes sharp as harpoons, their teeth bared in silent fury. And then she looked at him. At the back of the cage, a mermaid unlike the others sat upright, her silver tail coiled beneath her. Her hair, long and wild, was the color of storm clouds, streaked with veins of seafoam green. But it was her eyes that froze him, violet, deep as the abyss, burning with defiance. Kale had seen fear in men's eyes before. He had seen hatred. But this was judgment. "Captain," breathed Marlowe, his quartermaster, a grizzled man with a beard like tangled netting. "Do you know what these are worth?" Kale did. Mermaid scales could heal wounds. Their tears could summon storms. Their blood could make a man immortal, or so the tales said. But the silver mermaid did not beg. She did not weep. She only stared at him, as if she could see the rot in his soul. And for the first time in years, Kale's Stormfang felt shame. Back aboard the Siren's Wrath, the crew argued like gulls over scraps. "Sell him to the highest bidder," snarled Garrick, Kale's first mate, a brute with a face like knotted driftwood. "We be kings." "And what then?" snapped Lyra, the ship's navigator, her dark braids whipping in the wind. "You think curses don't follow gold like this?" Cato said nothing. He stood at the rail, watching the waves. The silver mermaid, Lyra, he'd heard the others whisper, was bound on deck, her tail draped in wet sailcloth. She watched the sea hungrily, as if it were a lover she longed to return to. He approached her slowly. "You understand me?" he asked. She tilted her head. When she spoke, her voice was the sea itself, waves crashing, tides turning, storms whispering. "You are not like them." It wasn't a question. Kale crouched beside her. "Who put you in chains?" "Men who fear what they do not own." Her gaze cut into him. "Will you be the same?" He had no answer. But as the wind howled and the ship groaned, Kale's Stormfang made a choice, one that would drown him in legend or destroy him in the deep. And the sea, ever patient, waited to claim its due. The dawn came slow and bloody, painting the sky in shades of fire. The Siren's Wrath floated like a ghost on the still waters, her sails limp, her crew restless. The mermaids huddled together on the deck, their tails shimmering weakly in the pale light. Some wept silently. Others glared at the pirates with eyes like sharpened coral. But Lyra did neither. She sat apart from the others, her silver scales catching the light like scattered coins. Her violet eyes never left Kale's Stormfang, as if she could peel back his skin and see the man beneath the scars. Kale rubbed his temples. His head ached from a night without sleep. The crew's arguing had lasted until the stars faded, so the mermaids freed them, or worse. Garrick, his first mate, spat over the railing. Keep him below deck till we reach port. The flesh markets in Blackbale pay a fortune for even one of these creatures. Lyra, her dark braids whipping in the salt wind, shook her head. You'd sell them to butchers? They're not fish, Garrick. They're people. People. Garrick laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Look at them. They're things. Pretty things, sure, but things all the same. Kale's fingers tightened around the hilt of his cutlass. He had seen slaves before, men and women stolen from coasts and sold like cargo. But this felt different. Then a voice cut through the tension, soft, but impossible to ignore. Captain. Every head turned. Leora had spoken. Her voice was not human. It was the whisper of waves on sand, the sigh of wind through sails. It made the hairs on Kale's neck rise. She tilted her chin up, unafraid. I would speak with you. Alone. Garrick snorted. Oh, now she's giving orders? Kale silenced him with a look. Then, against every instinct that had kept him alive this long, he nodded. Aye, we'll talk. He took her to his cabin, a cramped space of maps, stolen trinkets, and the lingering scent of salt and rum. Lyra moved awkwardly on land, her tail dragging behind her, but she refused help. Kale shut the door. Say what you need to say. Leora's gaze swept the room, lingering on the dagger resting on his desk, a blade carved from whalebone. You are not like the others, she said again. You keep saying that. Kale crossed his arms. What do you want? Freedom. The word hung between them, heavy as an anchor. Not just for me, for all of them. Kale exhaled through his nose. And why should I care? Because you are not cruel. Because you know what it is to be caged. His jaw clenched. She was right. He had been caged once. A memory flashed, iron bars, the stench of his own blood, the laughter of men who thought him broken. He shoved it away. Even if I wanted to help, my crew won't just let them go. They want gold. Leora's fingers brushed the edge of his desk. Then let me give you gold. Kale raised an eyebrow. There is a place, she continued, where the sea meets the sky. The veiled abyss. My people once ruled there, before the witch Morvat stole our throne. If you take me there, I can reclaim what was lost. And what's in it for me? The Coral Throne's treasury holds treasures beyond human greed. Pearls that glow with moonlight, jewels carved from Leviathan bones. Enough to make you the richest pirate who ever lived. Kale studied her. She was bargaining like a merchant, but her eyes betrayed something else, desperation. Why me? He asked quietly. Why not just swim away when we're not looking? The chains they bound us with are forged in dark magic that weaken us. I cannot dive deep enough to reach my home. Not alone. She hesitated. And I have seen your soul, Kale Stormfang. There is honor in you yet. The air between them grew thick. Kale turned away, staring out the porthole at the endless sea. He had spent years running from the man he used to be, the man who believed in honor, in oaths. But the sea had a way of dragging the truth out of a man. Finally, he spoke. I'll do it, but my crew won't follow without incentive. Lara nodded. Tell them of the treasure. Tell them whatever you must. When Kale stepped back onto the deck, every eye locked onto him. We're changing course, he announced. Garrick scowled. To where? To the veiled abyss. A murmur rippled through the crew. Even Lyra looked shocked. That's a death sentence, Garrick snapped. No ship that sailed there has ever returned. Kale grinned, the same reckless grin that had once made kings tremble. Then we'll be the first. He raised his voice. The mermaids promised us a treasure worth 10 kingdoms. Enough to make every man here a legend. The crew exchanged glances. Greed warred with fear in their eyes. Lyra stepped forward. And if it's a trick? Kale's gaze flicked to Lyra, who watched silently from the shadows. Then we'll drown like all the rest. The crew erupted, some cheering, others cursing. But Kale had them. The promise of gold was a language every pirate understood. The horizon darkened like a fresh bruise. Kale stood at the bow of the Siren's Wrath, his callous hands gripping the rail as the first cold wind sliced through the air. Behind him, the crew muttered nervously, their eyes darting between the gathering storm and the silver-scaled mermaid who sat bound near the mast. Leora's gills flared slightly, her violet eyes fixed on the churning waves. "They're coming," she murmured. Kale didn't need to ask who. Blackfin corsairs. The smugglers' allies had been hunting them for days, their black-sailed ships cutting through the water like sharks on a blood trail. And now, with the wind dying and the sky turning the color of a fresh wound, they had finally caught up. 5 ships, Rook called from the crow's nest, his voice tight, all armed to the teeth. Garrick spat over the side. "Should have slit the mermaid's throat when we had the chance. Now they'll slaughter us for stealing their prize." Kale shot him a glare. "You want to live? Then stop whining and fight." The crew scrambled, loading cannons, sharpening blades, tying down anything that might fly loose in the coming storm. But Kale's gaze kept drifting back to Leora. She was watching the sea, her fingers curling into fists. The iron cuffs around her wrists still glowed faintly with the witch's curse, sapping her strength. But there was something in her expression, not fear, but fury. Kale crouched beside her. "Can you fight?" She turned those unnatural violet eyes on him. "Not like this, not while bound." He hesitated only a heartbeat before drawing his dagger. The crew shouted as he sliced through her ropes. "Have you lost your damn mind?" Garrick roared. Kale ignored him, working the blade through the last of the bindings. Leora's skin was fever-hot where his fingers brushed against her. "Can you help us?" he asked lowly. She flexed her wrists, wincing as the iron cuffs bit into her flesh. Then, slowly, she nodded. "If you free the others, the sea will answer." The first cannonball hit with a deafening crack, splintering the railing. The Blackfin ships closed in, their decks swarming with cutthroats. Grapnel hooks flew through the air, biting into the Siren's Wrath's hull like fangs. Kale's crew fired back, pistols barking, swords flashing, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Then singing. It started soft, barely audible over the battle, a single, trembling note from one of the younger mermaids. Then another joined, and another. Leora stood at the center of them, her storm cloud hair whipping in the wind. She threw her head back and sang, not the gentle lullaby sailors whispered about, but something older, welder. The sea shuddered. The waves, once choppy, suddenly stilled, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Then, with a roar that shook the ships to their bones, the water reared up. A wall of liquid fury slammed into the Blackfin ships, capsizing 2 in an instant. Men screamed as they were swallowed by the hungry waves. The remaining ships fired wildly, but their cannonballs went wide, plunging harmlessly into the depths. Garrick stumbled back, his face white. Witchcraft. Kale didn't care. He lunged for the nearest grappling line, hacking through it with his cutlass. Cut them loose. Now. The crew moved like men possessed, severing the lines before the remaining corsairs could board. The last enemy ship tried to turn, to flee. But the sea wasn't done. A whirlpool opened beneath it, dragging the vessel down in a spiral of screaming men and splintered wood. Within seconds, there was nothing left. Silence. Then pain. Leora collapsed, her song cutting off abruptly. The other mermaids rushed to her side, their voices frantic. Kale reached her first, catching her before she hit the deck. Her skin was ice-cold now, her breathing shallow. "Iron, too much," she gasped, her fingers clutching weakly at the cursed cuffs. Kale's jaw tightened. He turned to Lyra. "Get me every blacksmith's tool on this ship. Now." Below deck, in the flickering lantern light, Kale worked. Leora lay on a pile of damp saddlecloth, her tail twitching in pain as he carefully chiseled at the cuffs. The metal resisted, hissing like a living thing where the tools touched it. "You're going to be fine," he muttered, more to himself than her. Her fingers suddenly wrapped around his wrist, stopping him. "Kale." He looked up. Her eyes were half-lidded, exhaustion dragging at her, but she held his gaze. "Why did you free me?" The question hung between them. Kale could have lied. Could have said it was for the treasure, for the crew, for any number of reasons that made sense. Instead, he told the truth. Because you looked at me like I was still a man, he said quietly, not a monster. When she opened her eyes again, they glowed. Thank you, she whispered. And for the first time since this madness began, Kale Stormfang felt something dangerous. Hope. The island appeared at dawn, a jagged wound of black rock jutting from the sea, wreathed in mist so thick it seemed to swallow the light. Kale adjusted the spyglass, his mouth set in a hard line. According to Lyora, this was the place, the Isle of Whispers, where the trident of the coral throne lay hidden. The crew muttered behind him, their voices hushed. Even Garrick, usually loud with complaints, was silent. Lyra shivered beside Kale, her dark braids damp with salt spray. I don't like this, she murmured. No charts mark this place. No sane sailor comes here. Kale lowered the spyglass. Good thing we're not sane then. Lyra stood at the prow, her silver tail now wrapped in a length of deep blue sailcloth to protect it from the sun. Her violet eyes were fixed on the island, her expression unreadable. The trident is here, she said, but the island is not empty. A gust of wind howled through the rigging, carrying with it the faintest sound, whispers just on the edge of hearing. The crew froze. Garrick's hand went to his pistol. What in the black depths was that? Lyra didn't answer. She only stepped closer to the railing, her gills flaring as if tasting the air. The drowned, she said softly. They do not rest. The longboat scraped against the rocky shore, the sound like bones dragging across stone. Kale stepped onto the beach, his boots sinking into black sand so fine it felt like ash. The mist clung to them, damp and cold, and the whispers grew louder, not words, not quite, but mourning, the sound of men lost to the sea. Leora moved beside him, her movements graceful even on land. The other mermaids had stayed aboard, still too weak from their captivity to make the journey. Garrick and Lyra followed, along with a handful of crewmen, all armed, all uneasy. Where now? Kale asked. Leora pointed up the jagged cliffs, where a narrow path wound its way into the mist. There, the cave of the forgotten. The climb was treacherous, the rocks slick with something that glistened like oil. More than once, a crewman slipped, cursing as his hands scraped against the stone. Then, halfway up, the whispers changed. Turn back. The voice was clear now, desperate. A man's voice, broken by the sea. One of the younger pirates, a boy called Finn, went pale. Did you hear? You do not belong here. Another voice, this time a woman's. Lyra's knuckles whitened around her dagger. Ghost, she breathed. Lenora didn't stop. They cannot harm you, she said. Only frighten. Kale forced himself to keep moving. The cave mouth yawned before them, dark as a throat. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, pleading. Leave this place. She will drown you all. The trident is cursed. Kale stepped inside. The air in the cave was thick, tasting of salt and something older, like the breath of a long-dead thing. Bioluminescent algae clung to the walls, casting an eerie blue glow over the cavern. And there in the center stood the trident. It was taller than a man, its 3 prongs gleaming like polished bone. The shaft was carved with runes that seemed to shift when Kale looked at them, twisting like eels in dark water. Lyra sucked in a breath. Gods above. Garrick stepped forward, his eyes alight with greed. That's it. That's the thing that'll make us rich. No, Lyra said sharply. It is not for you. Garrick ignored her, reaching out. A hand burst from the sand, skeletal fingers clamping around his ankle. Garrick shouted, stumbling back as more hands emerged, grasping, pulling. The whispers became screams, the cave shaking as the drowned dragged themselves from the earth. Skeletons in tattered sailor's garb, their eye sockets filled with black water. Kale's cutlass was in his hand before he could think. He hacked at the bones, shattering ribs, severing arms, but for every one he destroyed, 2 more took his place. Lyra fought beside him, her dagger flashing. We need to go now. Lyra didn't move. She stood before the trident, her hands outstretched. "Enough," she commanded. The cave shuddered. The drowned froze, their hollow gazes turning to her. "I am Lenora of the Coral Throne," she said, her voice echoing with something ancient. "You will not stop me." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, slowly, the skeletons sank back into the sand, their whispers fading into silence. Garrick scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with fury. "You could have done that the whole time." Leora ignored him. She reached for the trident, her fingers closing around the shaft. Anne screamed. The runes blazed red, searing her skin. She collapsed to her knees, her body convulsing as dark veins spread up her arms. Kale was at her side in an instant. "Lyra, the witch's curse," she gasped. "It burns." Garrick laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Serves her right. Let the sea witch have her." The sea raged as the siren's wrath fled the collapsing island, waves battering her hull like fists against a coffin. Kale carried Lyra across the deck, her body limp in his arms, the cursed trident clutched in his blistered grip. The crew watched in silence, some in awe, others in mutinous fury. Garrick wiped blood from his split lip, his eyes dark with hate. Lyra rushed forward, helping Kale lower Lyra onto a pile of damp sails. The mermaid's skin was feverish, her veins blackened where the trident's curse had touched her. "She's dying," Lyra whispered. Kale's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it." A shadow fell over them. "You're choosing her over your own men." Garrick's voice was a low growl. Behind him stood half the crew, their hands on their weapons. Kale rose slowly, his cutlass still sheathed, but his fingers twitched toward it. "Stand down, Garrick." Garrick barked a laugh. "Or what? You'll throw me overboard like the coward you've become." He stepped closer, his breath reeking of rum and rot. "We followed you for gold, not some fish's fairy tale." The ship groaned beneath them, waves slamming against the wood like the sea itself was listening. Kale didn't blink. Last warning. Garrick spat at his feet. Then he lunged. Steel flashed. Kale barely dodged Garrick's cutlass, the blade slicing air where his throat had been. The crew erupted, some siding with Garrick, others with Kale. Fists flew, knives glinted, and the deck became a battlefield. Lyra dragged Lyra back, shielding her as the fight raged. Kale fought like a man possessed, elbow to a pirate's nose, hilt to another's temple, but there were too many. Garrick's kick sent him crashing against the mast, pain exploding down his spine. "You're finished, Stormfang," Garrick sneered, raising his blade for the killing strike. A song cut through the chaos. Leora's voice, weak but unwavering, rose above the clash of steel. The words were ancient, the melody like waves dragging a drowning man under. The trident burned in Kale's grip, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. The crew stared, their faces washed in eerie blue light, as the runes along the shaft twisted like living things. The air smelled of lightning and the storm raged like a dying beast. Kale clung to the shattered remains of the siren's wrath's mast, salt water stinging his eyes as he watched Leora battle the Leviathan. She was barely recognizable now, her body flickering between mermaid and storm, her silver scales peeling away like petals in a gale. The trident in her hands burned brighter than the sun, its light etching shadows into the waves. The Leviathan screamed, its coral bones splintering under her strikes, but it wasn't dying fast enough. And neither was she. Kale forced himself to move. The deck tilted violently beneath him as he staggered toward the prow, where Lyra and the last of the loyal crew lashed themselves to the rails. "We have to help her," Lyra shouted over the wind. "How?" Kale roared back. Lyra's gaze dropped to the trident still clutched in his belt, the second one, the whalebone dagger he'd taken from his cabin. It was a pitiful thing compared to Leora's weapon, but it was all they had. Kale's fingers closed around the hilt. Then he jumped. The sea swallowed him whole. The water wasn't silent. It was alive with the Leviathan's shrieks, the crack of its bones, the thunder of Leora's magic. Kale kicked deeper, his lungs burning, his vision blurring, until he saw them. Leora, suspended in a vortex of swirling currents, her hair a pale banner in the dark. The Leviathan, its gaping maw inches from her, its teeth glinting like shattered glass. Kale didn't think. He struck. The whalebone dagger plunged into the Leviathan's remaining eye, black ichor clouding the water. The beast recoiled, its tail thrashing. And Lyora moved. With the last of her strength, she drove the trident into the Leviathan's skull. Light erupted. The sea turned white. The Leviathan's body disintegrated, its bones dissolving into foam. The storm above stilled, the waves calming as if smoothed by an unseen hand. And Lyora sank. Kale caught her before she could drift into the abyss. Her skin was cold, her gills barely fluttering. The trident slipped from her fingers, sinking into the dark. Kale, she whispered, bubbles rising from her lips. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, but he held her tighter, kicking for the surface with legs that screamed in protest. The world returned in fragments. Sky. Air. Lyra's hands hauling them onto the wreckage. Lyra lay limp in Kale's arms, her tail half transformed back into legs, her scales flaking away like dried salt. The crew gathered around them, their faces grim. "She's not breathing," someone said. Kale ignored them. He pressed his forehead to Lyora's, his voice raw. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare!" I gasped. Then, a cough. Lyora's eyes flew open, violet and burning. She convulsed, seawater spilling from her lips, her fingers clutching at Kale's shirt. "Morvath," she choked. "She's waiting." Kale didn't care. He pulled her against him, his hands shaking. "You're alive." Lyora's laugh was a broken thing. For now. Because the truth hung between them, unspoken. This wasn't over. And the next fight might cost more than their lives. The ruins of the sunken city loomed before them, a skeleton of coral towers and shattered palaces, half buried in the seabed. The water here was unnaturally still, heavy with the weight of centuries. Kale adjusted the breathing charm Lyora had pressed into his palm, a shimmering pearl that filled his lungs with air but left his skin prickling with salt. Beside him, Lyora swam with slow, pained strokes, her silver tail flickering between scales and human skin. The battle with the Leviathan had left her weak, but her violet eyes burned with unbroken resolve. "Morvath's throne room lies there," she murmured, pointing to a cavernous structure ahead, its entrance framed by the jaws of a petrified sea dragon. "She will be waiting." Lyra and the remaining crew hovered near the surface in a salvaged longboat, ready to strike if called, but this fight wasn't theirs. Kale gripped the whalebone dagger at his belt. "Can you face her?" Lyra's fingers brushed his. Not alone. Together, they swam into the dark. The throne room was a cathedral of bones. Rib cages of long-dead beasts arched overhead, their shadows stretching like phantom fingers across the sand. At the room's heart sat the coral throne, its spires jagged and cruel, and upon it lounged Morvath, the sea witch. She was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, terrifying, inevitable. Her hair writhed like ink in water, her skin the pale blue of drowned flesh. When she smiled, her teeth were needle-sharp. "Little Lyora," she crooned, "you've brought me a pet." Kale bared his teeth. "I'm no one's pet." Morvath's laughter echoed through the water. "No? Then what are you? A thief? A killer? A man who thinks he can challenge the sea itself?" She rose from her throne, her tail, black as a starless night, coiling beneath her. "The trident is gone. Your ship is wrecked. What power do you have left?" Lyra lifted her chin. "The same power that brought me here. The same power you stole." Morvath's grin faded. Then she attacked. The witch moved like a spear through water, her claws raking toward Lyora's throat. Kale intercepted, his dagger scraping against her talons. The impact sent him spinning backward, his arm numb. Lyora struck next, summoning a whirlpool that hurled Morvath into the bones of the ceiling. The witch shrieked, but the water obeyed her too. She twisted mid-motion, lashing out with a whip of living kelp that wrapped around Lyora's waist and slammed her into the sand. Kale lunged, driving his dagger into Morvath's side. She screamed, black blood clouding the water, then backhanded him so hard his vision whited out. "You dare," Morvath hissed, her wounds already stitching shut. You are nothing, a flicker, a breath, and I am the deep. She raised her hands, and the throne room shook. The bones of the dead reassembled, rising as skeletal warriors with blades of coral that surged toward Kale and Leora, an army of the drowned. Leora grabbed Kale's wrist. The throne, she gasped. It's the source of her power. It must be destroyed. Kale's gaze locked onto the coral throne, and he ran. Bones cracked against his ribs. Coral blades sliced his arms, but Kale didn't stop. He reached the throne just as Morveth realized his plan. No. Her scream was a physical force, but Kale was already swinging the whalebone dagger. The blade struck the throne, and the world exploded. Light ripped through the water, shattering the skeletons, tearing through Morvath's flesh. She howled, her body unraveling like smoke in a current, her voice fading into the abyss. Then silence. The coral throne crumbled to dust, and Leora collapsed. Kale caught her before she could hit the sand. Her skin was translucent, her scales flaking away like ash. It's done, she whispered. Kale's throat tightened. You're hurt. The throne's magic was all that held me together. She smiled weakly. But it's all right. The sea is free. Kale shook his head. No, no. There has to be another way. Leora pressed her palm to his cheek. There is one. She leaned in, her lips brushing his, and pushed. A rush of warmth flooded Kale's veins, his vision blurring with gold. When it cleared, Leora was fading, her edges dissolving into foam. What did you do? He demanded. Gave you what you gave me, she murmured, a second chance. Her body shimmered, then dissolved, not into death, but into the sea itself. The water trembled, and then, as if the ocean had taken a breath, she was gone. Kale stood at the helm, his skin permanently salt-bleached, his eyes forever gold. The crew spoke in whispers of how he'd changed, how storms stilled when he spoke, how sharks circled the ship but never attacked. Lyra smiled. Think she'll ever come back? Kale touched the whalebone dagger at his belt, the only thing he had left of her. Maybe, he said, or maybe I'll just have to wait. And the sea, endless and patient, stretched on before them.